The healthy human mind doesn't wake up in the morning thinking this is its last day on Earth. To lay close to the end is a kind of freedom. Good time to take inventory. The sand and rocks here, stained with thousands of years of warfare, they will remember. We go forward like a breath exhaled from the earth, with vigor in our hearts and one goal in sight.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be talking about the Sig Sauer Romeo 5 XDR. This is part 19 in a series of finding the best value budget red dots. It's not actually part 19, but today we are going to be talking about another exceptional entry in a long list of very, very good budget red dot. Before we get into the video, you know what time it is. I need to thank the sponsor of the video. You know them, you love them, it's Gun Deals. It is basically a website that compiles some of the best deals within the industry, both by users and by sponsored corporations that pay Gun Deals to advertise the best prices online. It is a very, very simple arrangement. You check out their website, you find the best deals, and you purchase those products using their affiliate links, which makes them a little bit of money and saves you a bunch of money as well. Now, on top of that, they don't take your money, they don't buy or sell anything. Again, they only point you in the right direction. And on top of that, they have been an exceptional sponsor for quite some time now. So if you want to help me out, go ahead and check them out. Once again, that is gun.deals. And I actually used their website to find the Sig Romeo 5 XDR for $160. Now, before we get into that, I do want to say, if you want to help me out personally, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, because all that sort of stuff is free and it really does help me out. Go ahead and comment literally anything down below. There's also Subscribestar, which is a pro to a Patreon. And if you want to pick up some new upper receivers, we have the Mark 3s and Mark 5s should be in stock. I'm not sure. I'm actually filming this about a week in advance of when it's going to go up. So by the time you see this video, all of that stuff could be sold out. We do have a new upper receiver, a special run of upper receivers. This is the Mach 18. It is a literal Mark 18 clone, just done on an extremely high value approach. You do have a true crane spec 10.3.556 barrel that is chrome lined in the chamber and the bore, exceptionally high quality, and we're selling these guys for $450 or $430 if you take a nitride BCG over a phosphate and chrome one. Now, the Mark 5, last one in our Mark series of upper receivers. This is a 12.5-inch 5.56 ballistic advantage barrel, 1-in-7 twist, mil-spec BCG upper and charging handle with 3 different options for the muzzle device. You get the 4-prong flash hider. I think we charge like an extra $20 for that from Venom, or the Strike Industries Venom, I should say. A2 flash hiders don't add any cost, and the Strike Industries King Comp is again like an extra 20 bucks. Now on the Mark 3s as well, we should have some of those back in stock, possibly, although most of the pre-orders for that restock have already been sold out. A few different options, an A2, which doesn't add any cost, and then of course you still have the Venom and the King Comp as well. But now with all of that, out of the way, let's go ahead and get into full disclosure. And the full disclosure is that I bought this optic for $160 from Borelli.com. They're running 20% off. Usually you can find these for anywhere from $190 to $220, though if you get them on a very good deal, they're generally $150 to $160. So I spent $160 on the Romeo 5 XDR. I have no relationship with SIG whatsoever. I have reviewed a lot of their other products. I've used a lot of their other products, and I like a lot of their other products, but I don't buy their Gen 1 guns. Now, getting into some very simple basics on the Romeo 5 XDR. It is basically a clone of the Romeo 5 in certain aspects and a complete departure in others. So what you have is a very similar looking housing. However, they do have a completely redesigned top section in which the top turret is completely enclosed within the body itself. So it is completely protected from any sort of side impacts that could be possible. On top of that, they are always exposed. Now you could always tape over them if that sort of thing bugs you. I have not had any issues with that whatsoever, including when I dropped it directly on top of the turret. And we'll get into that later, but it did pass with flying colors. Now, on the right side of the optic, it's not totally recessed inside of the optic body, but it is completely enclosed by about 1/8 of an inch of this 6061 T6 aluminum. Now, going into the rest of the body, you have a nearly one-piece design. The only separate piece of aluminum that's not part of the body is this little gold piece here in the bottom, and we'll get into that later, but I'm actually using the Strike Industries T1 Rex riser, the very bottom base plate area, because this actually does accept T1 riser mounts. So if you have a T1 low mount, a high quality T1 low mount, that's what I'm going to recommend instead of the base plate that it comes with, because the base plate that it comes with is basically going to be the main drawback that we will again talk about that in a minute. Now, what we have for the reticle with the XDR, I think you have two different reticle options. You have the Predator, which is a really odd reticle design that I don't recommend for anyone. And you have the EOTech Donut of Death. It's literally just an EOTech Donut of Death. You have a 2 MOA center dot, and you have a 65 MOA outer ring with those little hash marks in it to kind of help draw your eye to the center. That is a really, really good reticle option. It is tried and true. It has been used by many, many people. And it also has built-in ranging features, as well as if you're using it on a shotgun, which I have used this on a shotgun for several hundred rounds, because you guys have seen this on the channel quite a bit at this point. It allows you to bracket targets a little bit better, especially if you're like trying to lead clay pigeons or something like that, or small game again with like shotguns or something using a very slow projectile chasing a very fast target. The reticle is going to help you out in certain circumstances like that. And again, as I mentioned, because it is a 65 MOA circle, which is very similar to the average height at 100 yards. So if somebody fits perfectly inside of the reticle, they're at 100 yards. If they only make it to the center dot in the bottom, they're at 200 yards, so on and so forth. That being said, that's a minorly usable feature. I don't think most people are really going to be using it for that. Most people just like to have that extra donut of death in there, giving them that faster target acquisition, whether or not that's a real thing or just inside of their heads, kind of a placebo effect. But again, the placebo effect is a real thing. So if you like it, and I personally like it as well. Now, that being said, if you don't like the donut of death reticle, but you like all the other features on here, what you can simply do is hold the minus button for I believe like 5 or 10 seconds, and it will actually turn off that outer circle, so you don't have to deal with that again if that's not something that you're into. Personally, I like it, so I leave it on all the time. Now, battery life is quoted at 50,000 hours with their MOTAC. Now, MOTAC is just motion activation. It is perfect. I've never had an issue with it. I've never had an issue with it on any of their dots. It does an exceptional job. I've never noticed it be off. I've never been able to sneak up on it or move it slowly enough to where it wouldn't automatically turn on for me. And what that means is that, again, battery life is quoted at 50,000 hours on setting 6. We'll get into the battery life settings in a minute. Now that I can guarantee you is only with the 2 MOA dot, because when you have to emit a lot more of that LED based emitter, when you're using that 65 MOA circle, I would warrant that at setting 6 with the full 65 MOA outer circle, you're probably only getting like 10,000 hours of battery life. And on top of that, you're probably running it on like setting 8 or 9 in terms of their daylight settings anyways, which means that you're getting an actual battery life of like 5,000 hours. I would warrant on higher settings With the 65 MOA circle, you're probably only getting 5 to 10,000 hours of battery life. And to some of you, that's going to seem like, oh, that's a really small amount of time compared to like the rated 50,000 hours on other batteries. You got to take that with a grain of salt because, again, this is motion activated. So that means that you have 5 to 10,000 hours of use time, not necessarily of lifetime, because again, when you're not using it, it's not on. So if you leave this in your safe for 5 years, you come back, as long as that battery still has charge, it's going to turn on and work just fine. So to get 10,000 hours of use time, which is a year, that's a year of straight up use time on your red dot, would be very, very difficult. So I would rate the actual battery life as phenomenal. Now, the only situation in which you could possibly run into an issue is if this is a 24-hour truck gun and you have to use your truck for work or something else like that, so it gets used, say, like 10 hours a day or something like that, then you might want to switch them out every year. Some people switch all of their batteries out every year anyways. So again, not a bad idea. But the battery life, even though it is reduced with that outer 65 MOA circle, I'm going to say is still in actual use case, basically infinite, or as long as that battery can actually hold charge. Now, speaking of the battery, another departure, which is a big improvement for me, is that this uses a AAA battery. AAA batteries are, generally speaking, cheaper and much easier to find than 2032s. That means that you're probably going to have more of them laying around or be able to find more of them in a pinch should you need them. Now, the way that they get around a 2032 and the way that they house the AAA battery is not in some sort of extension on the side, but is actually built into the solid one-piece body. Now again, it's not a true one-piece body because the very bottom plate is a different piece, which is why I swapped it out for the better Strike Industries base mount. But because of this very, very chunky piece of aluminum, you do have a much more structurally strong optic body than on a lot of other optics, merely because of the fact that it is a solid chunk of aluminum with a little hollow section in the middle for the electronics and of course the battery as well. Now, because of that, if you are just comparing weights and you just want the lightest optic possible, this is going to be like 1 to 2 ounces heavier than like the same sort of micro T1, T2 style optic with a different mount. So you are sacrificing 1 to 2 ounces in all of that additional aluminum. For me, it's not even something that I would possibly consider a con, 1 to 2 ounces for a stronger mounting system, and we will get into that in just a minute. But overall, in my opinion, if you like the SIG Romeo 5, if you like the Holosun 400 series or 500 series, this is basically going to do all of those things in a very, very nice one-piece package. And this is almost the best red dot you can buy for under $200, with one exception, and that is that you're going to need to switch out the base plate. The reason for that is the base plate that it includes is a very bad design in terms of its lockup. So it does have an integrated recoil lug, which is good. I like to see integrated recoil lugs on all of my mounts regardless of what it is. However, they use a very, very small cross bolt, and they only recommend 18 to 20 inch-pounds of torque. Now that is very, very little torque holding your optic to your rail, or to your upper receiver in this case. Now, the problem that I have with that is that because that is such a low amount of clamping force on a very small clamping area on the stock one, not on this one, but on the stock one, that will not hold up to sharp impacts. Now, I test sharp impacts with drops. You might encounter a sharp impact in a different way. You might set this up against a wall and have it fall over. You might set it on a car door. You might hit it on a car door, car hood, something else like that. You could encounter a sharp impact in a wide variety of ways. I just test that with a drop test, 2 shoulder height drop tests on the top and side of the optic. Now, I knew that that was going to be a problem, and with only 18 to 20 inch-pounds of torque recommended on the base plate, I just took off the base plate and I never looked back. So we are using the Strike Industries Rex T1 riser, which puts the total price of this optic combo that you see on here right now at around $200. Now, if you don't get it on sale, you spend the full $200 on it, or worse, you buy it in like a retail store for like $250 or $300, then you're looking at like a $350 total package. Now, Normally, if you're buying online and being really smart with your money, you're going to spend anywhere from $200 to $250, and you can get different base plates as well that work just as good as the Strike Industries T1 Rex Riser. But you are going to need an additional mount. That is the same complaint that I have with the SIG Romeo 5, the Holosun anything, Holosun basically, you're going to need an additional mount. Or the Vortex, their Crossfires, or the SIG Romeo MSR, all of those need different mounts. The only two red dots that I've tested that have been good to go outside of the box without needing an additional mount or a higher quality mount have been the SIG Romeo 7S and the SIG Romeo 7. Both of those optics that I've tested, right out of the box, torque them down to spec, which is like 45 to 60 inch-pounds of torque on their base mounts, and they are rock solid. So those are the only two red dot options that I've tested that have been good to go outside of the box without needing a new mount. Now, both of those cost around $200. This also costs around $200, but needs the additional base plate, although I got this and the SIG Romeo 7S for $160. So in terms of ultimate value, it's very, very close. But this is going to have some advantages. So if you wanted to compare this directly against the SIG Romeo 5, you might be asking yourself, is this worth the extra $60 to $100 over just the base SIG Romeo 5? And then of course you can add on like a Geisley mount for like 60 or 70 bucks and be at the same cost as this. The problem with that is that the emitter and the design of this optic is, in my opinion, or not necessarily even in my opinion, it is objectively a better, stronger design. And the emitter, because it uses the higher quality, more expensive emitter, which is where most of that additional cost comes from, you're using that higher quality 2 MOA dot, 65 MOA circle. The 2 MOA dot itself is a much crisper dot than like a standard red dot, and of course you have the additional advantage of having that 65 MOA circle if you like it, on top of the more durable, more clean body design using a AAA battery instead of a 2032. So there are a lot of advantages here, and I really, really like the red dot. I think it does an excellent job at just about everything. But again, the only thing that it's not great out of the box is you're going to need to add an additional base plate or something else on there so that you can increase the amount of torque. Now, we've talked about it plenty. These T1 riser from the Strike Industries, the T1 Rex riser, I have this one here currently torqued down to 50 inch-pounds. I could go a little bit higher if I wanted to, but I don't really need to. This one here uses a much, much larger cross bolt. It has about the same amount of clamping area, but again, 2.5 times the clamping force. That's going to hold a lot better, on top of integrated recoil lugs as well. Now, I always do a double drop test on just about every optic that I review. This one here was no different. So we set it up on this ACR that you see right here. This is a $3,000 ACR. Very, very nice. Came with a 10.5 barrel that I have somewhere around here as well, that I pinned and welded, which is a cardinal sin for the intro, with a faux suppressor. So that intro is filmed, technically this is a rifle, this isn't an SBR or anything, so that entire intro was filmed with a 10.5 inch barrel with a 6 inch fake suppressor pinned on the end, which is going to upset some people that I would do that to a $1,000 barrel setup. But anyways, so we did a double drop test, and at I believe 36 yards we did our control group, which is of course 5 rounds. Before we drop it, we were not using a magnifier or anything else like that because I didn't want to induce any additional parallax, then put it back on and have different parallax by my head being in a slightly different position. So we did the 5-round control group when all 5 rounds were basically touching with like one flyer. And then we did a double drop test from shoulder height, and we landed squarely on top of the turret, and the turret is actually scratched up in multiple places from where it like landed on a rock or something else like that. And then we did the drop on the side. Now, when we go back, we do another 5-round group with the exact same point of aim to see if we have any shift in zero. And I believe 7 or 8 of the rounds were in the exact same hole. And then we had a couple flyers because it's me with a red dot at 36 yards. I'm going to have a couple little flyers in there. So overall, perfect. It held zero absolutely perfectly. There was no distinguishable difference between the zeros. It did an exceptional job. no problems whatsoever. So for me personally, that adds up to a red dot that I really like. I do think that it is an exceptional value. It is this close to being the ultimate package right out of the box. It's smaller and lighter than the SIG Romeo 7S. It has a way better emitter. It's much smaller and lighter than the SIG Romeo 7, and again has a better emitter, a better reticle system in that. Also a much smaller optic body system. But you do need the additional base plate, whereas the SIG Romeo 7, SIG Romeo 7S can be rocked and rolled right out of the box, and they're not going to have any issues with like shift in zero or anything else like that with a harsh impact. Now, I personally have no issues running these sorts of optics on home defense guns, on competition guns, or just, you know, general purpose rifles as well. I've had great luck with all of my SIGs and Holosuns. However, I do know that some people have not. Some people have had bad experiences, or they have optics that are dead outside of the box, which I've also heard with other companies. If you want true ultimate durability, most of that is not actually within the optic body. These are basically chunks of aluminum. They're not really ever going to crush or break on you. A lot of that durability is going to come from the internal electronics, and so for that ultimate sort of thing, you're still going to be stuck with like EOTechs or aim points, because if you ask an aim point where it's going to be in 10 years, it's just going to look you in the eye and say, I'm still going to be right here in 10 years. If you ask the SIG Romeo 5 XDR where it's going to be in 10 years, it might be in the bottom of a trash heap somewhere, because again, you don't know, you don't necessarily have that true ultimate long-term durability. You just don't have that sort of track record on these because they just haven't been around that long, and they are using cheaper manufacturing methods and less extensive quality controls. So for me personally, I've had great luck with it. I vet basically everything that I test through thousands of rounds. Speaking of which, I've had this on 5 or 6 different guns, including 300 rounds of 12 gauge through the semi-auto, the BF12, I want to say. Yeah, it's the bullpup 12 gauge shotgun. And it has performed excellently. I've never noticed any shift in zero. I've never gotten any flickering because it is using the higher quality emitter. The dot always looks super crisp when you're using it on the appropriate brightness level. It gets way more than daylight bright, brighter than I would ever need it. So usually I run it on like setting 7 or 8. Now it does have night vision settings. However, I don't have night vision, so I can't really talk about it. From what I've heard, cheap budget glass, Chinese glass, does not really mix well with night vision. So yes, these optics have night vision, but their usability is not really all that high. So overall, again, for me, this is this close to being the best possible red dot for under $200. You almost don't need to change anything from the box. It has an excellent reticle, a very crisp dot. It has motion activation. It has a AAA battery and a very solid body design with the recessed turrets. So overall, for budget red dots, I would say it's a 9.5 out of 10. Honestly, if they just swapped out the crossbolt for a much larger crossbolt and a better hex design so that you could get like 40 to 60 inch-pounds of torque on it, somewhere in that range is a good place to be for most red dots. If they could do that, it would be the best out-of-the-box red dot for under $200. And again, if you could find it on a steal for like $150, I would absolutely pick them up. Now, because it does not, it's going to require an additional piece to really realize its full potential, which for a lot of people, they're going to be switching out their mounts anyways, which is what I would recommend on most really budget red dots. Even the SIG Romeo 5, which I love, the Holosuns, the 400 series and the 500 series really need new mounts to really be as reliable and really hold zero as good as they can, because you're almost never going to get shift on the internals. Like I literally dropped this right on the turret. You can see the scratch marks on it. I'll show you some close-up photos of it, and it did not shift zero at all. So most of that is going to be within the mount. So with that out of the way, if you have access to, or you know of a really good T1 style low riser mount that you like, and you have access to it and it's not an exorbitant amount of money, and you're fine with having to swap that out, then I would say it's an absolute go. But again, if you're looking for something out of the box that functions perfectly and you don't want to dick around with anything else, switching out mounts, anything else like that, for budget red dots, you're still going to be stuck with the SIG Romeo 7S, which doesn't have a very great emitter. It really blooms out really harsh if you're not using the perfect setting on it. So if you're like just one setting too high on it, you're going to get a very blurry, very halo effect dot. SIG Romeo 7, the big red dot, is perfect out of the box, but it is again just a much bigger red dot. So if you're not into big 30mm red dots, you're not really going to be into that one all that much. But overall, I'm going to say that it is excellent. Even though it is a little bit more money, I would prefer this red dot over the regular Romeo 5 or the Holosun 400 series or even the 500 series for the most part. So overall, it's got to be in the top 2 or 3 budget red dots out there. I really like it. I'm going to continue to run it, or actually maybe give it away to some of my Subscribe Star guys. But with all that out of the way, I really like the optic. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if there is any other budget red dots that I should be checking out. I actually have a Holosun 403R, which is the non-solar panel, which is good because I don't like solar panels. I think they're very, very gimmicky, but I got it in the gold dot variety, so that will be up for review eventually. And behind me on the Geisley, can you guys see the Geisley? Oh. You guys can barely see the Geisley. That has a Holosun 515 GM, which is their 7075 series of red dots. That'll also be up for review. It's okay. But anyways, that's about it for the video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace off. Now, through the magic of editing, I'm actually going to go back to the beginning of recording and go into a little bit more detail on the Mach 18 and the Mark V builds that should be up on the website, although by the time this video goes out, they might all be out of stock. So I will see you guys later. Bye. Before I actually start filming the video, I'm actually going to do a little preamble on the Mach 18 and Mark V. So something that is new for all of our Mark series is that we are pinning all of the gas blocks. So originally we weren't doing anything special to the gas blocks other than the high temp thread locker. Then we went to double dimpling, and then I thought, well, that's kind of overkill. If I'm double dimpling all the gas blocks, you might as well do a single dimple and then pin, and kind of eliminate a little bit of redundancy there and include a better, stronger, more durable mounting solution, so it kind of mates those two pieces together. So on all of the Mark series going forward, every single one that ships out will have a pinned gas block unless somebody requests something special like a adjustable gas block, or they ask me not to, just in case they want to do something like that in the future. Now, on top of that, so you still have the high temp thread locker, dimpled barrel, pinned gas blocks on all the stuff shipping out. We are also lapping all of the upper receivers, so that is a new process as well, on top of bedding the barrels. Now, bedding the barrels and lapping the upper receivers, people say will increase your accuracy from anywhere from 1/4 MOA to 1/2 MOA. Again, that's ultimate mechanical accuracy, not like your groups will magically be that much smaller if you're not doing your part. But technically speaking, they can add some mechanical accuracy. So lapping the upper receiver, make sure that that face that your barrel extension mounts up to has a perfectly flat, perfectly concentric square face, so you get the best contact surface area and the most repeatable accuracy, the best harmonics, that sort of thing. Bedding the barrel is a very similar process where you do some sort of solution to the barrel extension that fills in all of the very, very, very small gaps that will naturally be there when you're trying to put two pieces of metal together. They're not going to perfectly fit together. There's always going to be those tiny, tiny little gaps. So in this case, we're just using some Loctite, some 272 Loctite, which is again a high temperature Loctite. All you do is you apply a very light coating of that through to your barrel extension, slide it into the upper receiver. Over time, that hardens and again creates a perfect seal between the barrel extension and the upper receiver, and doesn't have any sort of negative impacts. Now, we use a very, very small amount to make sure that that never becomes an issue, because you can always overdo something by just putting in there a ton. I've seen people do it. My brother actually did that to one of his guns where he put just way too much in there, and then over time it would start to like seep out and stuff like that. But the stuff that we're using should not do that whatsoever. So a couple new processes on top of course, sequentially torquing down the barrel nut to 50 foot-pounds. So we go 25, 35, and then 50. And then we have anti-seize. It's again another Permatex solution. We use Permatex for a lot of stuff. They make a lot of really good stuff. We use Permatex anti-seize solution on your barrel nut. So you have a steel barrel nut and aluminum receiver extension. So anti-seize, just make sure that you can take those apart later on. 50 foot-pounds of torque is what we do all of our upper receivers to make sure that there is never any issues there with anything. If you don't know, the Mark 18 was basically US SOCOM's recommendation for the smallest, shortest 5.56 that they could get. This is a 10.3. So this is actually a true to spec 10.3 phosphate exterior, chrome lined barrel. So this is actually an extremely high quality barrel from Ballistic Advantage. This is their true 10.3 crane spec gas port. So if you get upset at me that it does not run steel, or if you want me to make it run steel, I can open up the gas port a little bit, because the crane spec I believe is 0.072, and that will run brass cased beautifully and be very, very soft, or as soft as a 10.3 can be, but it's not really going to like your cheaper, weaker ammunitions, because again, that is a very, very small gas port with so little dwell time on a 10.3 barrel. You do have a chrome lined chamber and bore, extremely high quality, 4150, 1-in-7 twist, all very, very good there. The BCGs that we went with, there's a little bit of a snafu there. We were supposed to have all phosphate and chrome. However, I ordered some nitride on accident, so there's going to be an option for the phosphate chrome is going to be the standard one with the standard cost. And then if you want a nitride one, we actually knock $20 off of the cost. And that is my problem. That's my fault for accidentally ordering the wrong ones. So again, if you are fine with the nitride BCGs from AO Precision, you will get $20 off. So I think it goes from $450 down to $430, I believe. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the Mark V. The Mark V is a standard Mark series upper receiver. This one here is the 12.5. This is the last one in the Mark series of upper receivers. 12.5-inch 5.56 barrel, 1-in-7 twist. Again, from Ballistic Advantage. This one here is, of course, dimpled and pinned in place, so it's never going to shift on you. UTG Arwen 10-inch Pro handguard. So this is their made in the USA M-LOK handguards. 7 sides of M-LOK here at the end. Full Picatinny on top that is T-marked if you care about that sort of thing. Very standard, and the same BCG situation as well. We'll knock $20 off if you go with the nitride versus the phosphate chrome. Phosphate chrome is a much more durable coating, not necessarily the phosphate part, but the chrome part is a much more desirable coating than just the straight up nitride. Although again, the straight up nitride is going to do a very, very good job in virtually all circumstances, but that chrome lining is going to be more durable for tens of thousands of rounds versus again, nitride. So very quick rundown on that, but now that the time has come for me to actually talk about the video. So we're going to actually, through the magic of editing, end the video here and begin filming the regular portion now.